Hello, everybody. This is Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy, Part 1, Chapter 12. The Princess Kitty Shtcherbatskaya was 18 years old. She was making her first appearance in society this winter, and her triumphs had been more brilliant than her elder sisters, than even her mother had anticipated. All the young men in Moscow who danced at balls were more or less in love with Kitty, but besides these there were two who, during this first winter of her debut, were serious aspirants to her hand. Levin, and soon after his departure, Count Vronsky. Levin's frequent visits and his unconcealed love for Kitty were the first subjects in regard to her future that gave cause for serious conversation between her father and mother. The prince and princess had lived discussions about it. The prince was on Levin's side and declared that he could not desire a better match. The princess, with the skill which women have for avoiding the question, insisted that Kitty was very young, that she did not show great partiality for Levin, and, moreover, that he did not seem to be serious in his attentions. But she did not express what was in the bottom of her heart, that she was ambitious for a more brilliant marriage, that Levin did not appeal to her sympathies, and that she did not understand him. And when Levin took a sudden leave for the country, she was delighted, and said with an air of triumph to her husband, "You see, I was right." When Vronsky appeared upon the scene, she was still more delighted, and her hopes of seeing Kitty not only well but brilliantly married were more than confirmed. For the princess there was no comparison between the two suitors. The mother disliked Levin's brusque and strange way of looking at things, his awkwardness in society, which she attributed to his pride, and what she called his savage life in the country, occupied with his cattle and peasants. And she was still more displeased because Levin, though he was in love with her daughter, had been a frequent visitor at their house for 6 weeks, had appeared like a man who was hesitating, watching, and questioning whether, if he should offer himself, the honor which he conferred upon them would be not too great. Was it not customary for one who comes assiduously to a house where there was a marriageable daughter to declare his intentions? And then his sudden departure without informing anyone. It is fortunate, the mother thought, that he is so unattractive, and that Kitty has not fallen in love with him. Vronsky, on the other hand, satisfied all her requirements. He was rich, intelligent, of good birth, with a brilliant career at court or in the army before him, and, moreover, he was charming. Nothing better could be desired. Vronsky was devoted to Kitty at the balls, danced with her, and called upon her parents. There could be no doubt that his intentions were serious. And yet the poor mother had passed a winter full of doubts and perplexities. When the princess herself was married through the influence of an aunt, she was 30 years old. Her fiancé, who was well known by reputation, came to see her and to show himself. The interview was favorable, and the intermediary announced the impression produced. On the following day the official demand was made upon the parents and granted, and all had passed off very simply and naturally. At least so it seemed to the princess as she looked back to it. But when she came to see her own daughters married, she learned by experience how difficult and complicated in reality this apparently simple matter was. What anxieties, what cares, what waste of money, what collisions with her husband, and when the time came for Dolly and Natalie to be married. And now she was obliged to pass through the same anxieties, and with even more bitter quarrels with her husband. The old prince, like all fathers, was excessively punctilious about everything, and concerned the honor and purity of his daughters. He was distressingly jealous of them, especially of Kitty, his favorite, and every opportunity he accused his wife of compromising his daughter. The princess had become accustomed to these scenes from the days of her elder daughters, but she confessed that her husband's strictness was founded on reason. Many of the practices of society had undergone a change, and the duties of mothers were becoming more and more difficult. She saw how Kitty's young friends went freely into society, rode horseback, were forward with men, went out to drive with them alone. She saw that many of them no longer made courtesies, and, what was more serious, each of them was firmly convinced that the business of choosing a husband was incumbent on her alone, and not at all on the parents. Marriages aren't made as they used to be, were the thoughts and remarks of these young ladies, and even of some of the older people. But how are marriages made nowadays? And the question the princess could not get anyone to answer. The French custom, which allows the parents full liberty to decide the lot of their children, was not accepted, was even bitterly criticized. The English custom, which allows the girls absolute liberty, was not admissible. The Russian custom of marriage, though an intermediary, was regarded as a relic of barbarism. Everybody ridiculed it, even the princess herself. But she was unable to decide what course of action to take. Every one with whom the princess talked said the same thing. It's high time to renounce those exploded notions. It is the young folks, not the old, who get married, and therefore it's for them to make their arrangements in accordance with their own ideas. It was well enough for those without daughters to say this, but the princess knew well that if she allowed Kitty to enjoy the society of young men, she ran the risk of seeing her fall in love with some one whom her parents would not approve, who would not make her a good husband, or would not dream of marrying her. According to the views of the princess, one might better give 5-year-old children loaded pistols as playthings than allow young people to marry according to their own pleasure, without the aid of their parents. And therefore Kitty gave her mother much more solicitude than either of the other daughters had. Just at present her fear was that Vronsky would content himself with playing the gallant. She saw that Kitty was in love with him, and felt assured only when she thought that he was a man of honor. But she could not hide the fact that through the new liberty allowed in society, it would be very easy for a man of the world to turn the head of a young girl without feeling the least scruple at enjoying this new sort of intoxication. The week before, Kitty had told her mother of a conversation which she held with Vronsky during a mazurka, and this conversation seemed significant to the princess, though it did not absolutely satisfy her. Vronsky told Kitty that he and his brother were both so used to letting their mother decide things for them that they never undertook anything of importance without consulting her. And now, he added, I'm looking for my mother's arrival from Petersburg as a great piece of good fortune. Kitty reported these words without attaching any importance to them, but her mother gave them a meaning conformable to her desire. She knew the old countess was expected from day to day, and that she would be satisfied with her son's choice. But it seemed strange to her that he had not offered himself before his mother's arrival, as though he feared to offend her. In spite of these contradictions, she gave a favorable interpretation to these words, so anxious was she to escape from her anxieties. Bitterly as she felt the unhappiness of her oldest daughter, Dolly, who was thinking of leaving her husband, she was completely absorbed in her anxieties about her youngest daughter's fate, which seemed to be trembling in the balance. Levin's arrival today added to her troubles. She feared lest Kitty, through excessive delicacy, would refuse Vronsky out of respect to the sentiment which she had once felt for Levin. His arrival promised to throw everything into confusion, and to postpone a long-desired consummation. Has he been here long? Asked the princess of her daughter, when they reached home after their meeting with Levin. Since yesterday, mamma. I have one thing that I want to say to you, the princess began, but at the sight of her serious and agitated face, Kitty knew what was coming. Mamma, she said, blushing and turning quickly to her, don't speak about this, I beg of you, I know all. She felt as her mother felt, but the motives that caused her mother to feel as she did were repugnant to her. I only want to say that as you have given hope to one... Mamma, Golubchik, don't speak. It's so terrible to speak about this. I will not, replied her mother, seeing the tears in her eyes. Only one word, moja dusha. You have promised to have no secrets from me. Never, mamma, never, looking at her mother full in the face and blushing. But I have nothing to tell. Now, even if I wanted to, I could not say what and how. I could not. No, with those eyes she cannot speak a falsehood, was the mother's thought, smiling at her emotion. The princess smiled to think how momentous appeared to the poor girl the thoughts that were passing in her heart.